The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the playground as I watched my daughter Emma play on the swings at Riverside Park in Denver. It was one of those perfect October days when the air feels crisp, but the sun still warms your face. And I remember thinking how lucky we were to have found such a wonderful community here in Colorado. My sister-in-law Rachel had just offered to watch Emma for the weekend, while my husband Michael and I took our first real vacation in 3 years, and everything seemed to be falling into place perfectly. Looking back now, I realize that was the moment when the first domino fell, setting off a chain of events that would shatter not just my family, but 3 other families, and expose a monster who had been hiding in plain sight for over a decade. Rachel had married my brother James 4 years ago, and from the moment she entered our family, she seemed like a godsend. She worked at Little Treasures Daycare, one of the most prestigious childcare centers in Denver, with glowing reviews and a waiting list that stretched for months. Parents drove from neighboring towns just to enroll their children there, and Rachel was their star employee. She had this way with children that seemed almost magical, always knowing exactly what to say to calm a crying toddler or engage a shy preschooler. When she offered to babysit for family members, we all jumped at the chance. After all, who better to trust with our precious little ones than someone who had devoted her entire career to caring for children? 3 years ago, everything changed, though none of us recognized the significance at the time. My nephew Lucas, James and Rachel's neighbor's son, whom they often babysat, died in what appeared to be a tragic accident. He was only 4 years old, a bright, energetic little boy who loved dinosaurs and always wore his favorite green T-Rex shirt. Rachel had been watching him that Saturday afternoon while his parents attended a wedding in Boulder. According to Rachel, she had put Lucas down for his afternoon nap in the guest bedroom and went to fold laundry in the next room. She said she heard a thud and ran to check, finding Lucas at the bottom of the stairs. By the time the paramedics arrived, it was too late. The image of Rachel at the funeral is burned into my memory. She wore a simple black dress and stood beside the small white casket, tears streaming down her face as she delivered a eulogy that had everyone in the church sobbing. She spoke about Lucas's infectious laugh, his curiosity about the world, and how he had touched her life in his short time on Earth. His parents, devastated beyond words, actually thanked Rachel for being there, for trying to save him, for loving their son like her own. What struck me as odd, even through my grief, was how quickly everything was arranged. The funeral took place less than 24 hours after Lucas died, barely giving anyone time to process what had happened. When I mentioned to Rachel a few days later that it seemed unusual for such a young child to attempt to navigate stairs alone, especially since Lucas had always been cautious about heights and typically scooted downstairs on his bottom, her reaction was immediate and sharp. Her face contorted into an expression I had never seen before, something between rage and disgust, as if I had accused her of the unthinkable. She snapped at me, asking if I was seriously implying she had pushed a 4-year-old down the stairs. The venom in her voice made me take a step back, and I quickly mumbled something about children being unpredictable, trying to smooth over the moment. But deep in my stomach, a cold knot formed, a feeling I couldn't quite name but couldn't shake either. 2 weeks after Lucas's funeral, Rachel showed up to Sunday dinner carrying a new designer handbag, a beautiful leather piece that I recognized from a recent fashion magazine as costing at least $3,000. When my mother complimented it, Rachel smiled and said she had found it at an estate sale for a fraction of the price. She also wore new jewelry, elegant pieces that caught the light as she moved, and mentioned that she and James were planning some home renovations. It seemed like an odd time for such expenditures, especially since I knew James's construction job had been slow recently, but I pushed the thoughts away. People grieve in different ways, I told myself. Maybe retail therapy was Rachel's coping mechanism. 10 months later, our cousin Patricia's daughter Sophie died while in Rachel's care. Sophie was 6 years old, a delicate child with severe allergies that the entire family knew about. Patricia was meticulous about Sophie's condition, carrying EpiPens everywhere, alerting every caregiver, and posting reminders in family group chats about foods to avoid. Peanuts were Sophie's worst trigger, something that could send her into anaphylactic shock within minutes. Patricia had even created laminated cards with Sophie's photo and allergy information to give to anyone who might watch her. So when we learned that Sophie had died from anaphylactic shock due to peanut exposure at Rachel's house, the news hit like a sledgehammer. I drove to Rachel's house the day after Sophie's death, finding her in bed, curtains drawn, unable to eat or speak above a whisper. She clutched Sophie's favorite stuffed rabbit, a worn pink bunny that Patricia had asked her to keep until she could bear to see it again. Rachel's Instagram had already become a memorial to Sophie, filled with photos of the little girl at various family gatherings, each captioned with broken heart emojis and messages about angels gaining their wings too soon. When Rachel finally returned to work at the daycare, parents sent flowers and cards, praising her strength in the face of such repeated tragedy. I tried to approach the subject delicately when we met for coffee a week later. The cafe was nearly empty, just us and an elderly couple in the corner, and I thought it would be a safe space to talk. I asked how Sophie could have been exposed to peanuts when everyone knew about her allergy. Rachel's hands shook as she lifted her coffee cup, and she couldn't meet my eyes. She muttered something about Sophie possibly getting into something when she wasn't looking, maybe some candy another child had left behind. Her voice was so quiet I had to lean in to hear her, and when she finally looked up, her eyes were red-rimmed but strangely empty, like she was reciting lines from a script she didn't quite believe. That same month, James and Rachel announced they were moving into a beautifully renovated Victorian house in Cherry Creek, one of Denver's most expensive neighborhoods. The house had been on the market for over $1 million, with its wraparound porch, original hardwood floors, and meticulously restored period details. When I asked James how they could afford it, he mentioned something vague about good investments and Rachel's family helping out. But I knew Rachel's family lived modestly in Nebraska, her father working at a grain elevator and her mother as a school cafeteria worker. Nothing about their financial situation made sense, but once again, I kept my concerns to myself, not wanting to seem jealous or petty during a time of mourning. Halloween arrived with its usual fanfare in Denver, the streets filled with excited children in costumes, jack-o'-lanterns glowing on every porch. Rachel had invited several family members to her new house for a pre-trick-or-treating party, complete with games, candy apples, and a haunted basement she and James had spent weeks creating. My other nephew, 7-year-old Marcus, was particularly excited. He arrived dressed as Spider-Man, his mask already askew from trying to eat through it in the car. Rachel had set up her pool area with floating LED lights and spooky decorations, though she had carefully covered the pool with a safety cover, knowing young children would be running around in the dark. The next morning, we woke to the devastating news that Marcus had drowned in Rachel's pool. According to Rachel, Marcus had somehow managed to pull back the heavy pool cover while the adults were inside cleaning up. She said she had only left him alone for a few minutes while she went to get more trash bags. And when she returned, she found the cover partially removed and Marcus floating face down in the water. She had pulled him out and performed CPR while James called 911, but it was too late. 3 children, all dying while under Rachel's care, all within 3 years. The statistical impossibility of it crashed over me like a wave. This time, I couldn't stay silent. I called my mother that evening, my hands trembling as I held the phone. When I finally worked up the courage to voice what had been gnawing at me, suggesting that it seemed strange that all 3 children had died while in Rachel's care, my mother's response was swift and harsh. She cut me off mid-sentence, her voice cold with disapproval. She reminded me that Rachel was devastated, that she had loved those children, and how dare I suggest anything sinister during such a tragic time. She said grief was making me look for someone to blame, and that I needed to get help if I was having such dark thoughts. I tried reaching out to other family members, starting with my father, then my Aunt Margaret, then my cousins. Each conversation followed the same pattern. They would listen with increasing discomfort as I laid out the facts, then shut me down with talk of coincidence, tragedy, and the need to support Rachel during her time of loss. Some suggested I was jealous of Rachel's close relationships with the children. Others that I was creating conspiracy theories to cope with my own grief. By the time Sunday dinner came around, I could feel the weight of their judgment the moment I walked through my parents' door. My brother James pulled me aside before we even sat down to eat. He led me to the back porch, closing the door behind us, his face a mixture of concern and frustration. He told me the family was worried about me, that my theories about Rachel were becoming obsessive and unhealthy. He suggested I talk to someone, a professional, about these paranoid delusions before they destroyed our family relationships. Even my husband Michael, who had always supported me unconditionally, began to express doubts. He held me that night as I cried, whispering that grief could make us see patterns where none existed, that sometimes horrible coincidences happened, and we had to find a way to accept them. Feeling completely isolated, I reached out to my best friend Sarah, someone outside the family who might see things more objectively. We met at a wine bar downtown, and I poured out everything, every strange detail, every gut feeling, every piece that didn't quite fit. Sarah listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or asking for clarification. When I finished, she sat back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. Then she pointed out something I had somehow missed in my focus on the deaths themselves. Every single time a child had died, James had been conveniently out of town for work. Lucas died while James was at a construction conference in Phoenix. Sophie died during James's fishing trip to Montana. Marcus drowned while James was visiting a job site in Salt Lake City. The pattern was too precise to be coincidental. Sarah also noted that Rachel always insisted on watching the children alone, turning down offers of help from other family members, claiming she had everything under control. She was always the first to call 911, always the one to find the bodies, always the one to organize the funerals with remarkable efficiency. We sat in that wine bar until closing time, mapping out timeline after timeline, and the picture that emerged was horrifying in its clarity. But I knew that without concrete evidence, my theories would continue to be dismissed as the ravings of a grieving woman unable to accept tragedy. 2 weeks after our wine bar revelation, Rachel and James announced they were taking a month-long vacation to Europe. They had both quit their jobs, Rachel leaving the daycare where she had worked for 5 years, and James walking away from his foreman position at the construction company. They spoke excitedly about wanting to focus on family, about needing time to heal from all the losses, about the importance of living life to the fullest, because you never knew when tragedy might strike. The irony of that last statement made my stomach turn. They showed us photos of the hotels they had booked, first-class airline tickets, guided tours through Italy, France, and Greece. The trip would cost more than most people's annual salary. It was during this family gathering that Rachel made her generous offer. She noticed how tired Michael and I looked, commenting on the dark circles under my eyes, the stress evident in our faces. She suggested that while she and James were so focused on rest and renewal, perhaps we needed the same thing. She offered to pay for a weekend getaway for Michael and me to a luxury resort in Aspen, all expenses paid. Her eyes shone with what looked like genuine concern as she insisted we needed to take care of ourselves, that the recent tragedies had taken a toll on everyone. And then, almost as an afterthought, she mentioned that she would be happy to watch Emma while we were gone. My blood turned to ice at her words. Emma, my precious 5-year-old daughter with her father's green eyes and my stubborn streak, alone with Rachel for an entire weekend. Every instinct in my body screamed danger, but I was trapped. Refusing would seem ungrateful and paranoid, confirming everyone's belief that I was losing touch with reality. Accepting meant potentially putting my daughter in mortal danger. I felt Michael's hand on my back, a gentle pressure that could have meant anything, support or warning or simple comfort. The room seemed to spin slightly as I forced a smile and thanked Rachel for her generous offer. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through possibilities. If I was right about Rachel, and every fiber of my being told me I was, then Emma would be her next target. But why? What possible motive could drive someone to murder children, especially children they claim to love? Money seemed like an obvious answer given their sudden wealth. But how? Insurance policies would require the parents' knowledge and consent, and none of the bereaved parents had mentioned any payouts. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces refused to fit together into any logical pattern. I spent the next week in a state of hypervigilance, watching Rachel's every interaction with Emma at family gatherings. She was, as always, wonderful with her. Emma adored her Aunt Rachel, running to hug her the moment she arrived, chattering excitedly about her kindergarten adventures. Rachel listened with what appeared to be genuine interest, braiding Emma's hair while she talked, teaching her simple card games, reading her favorite stories with different voices for each character. If I hadn't known about the 3 dead children, I would have seen nothing but a devoted aunt. But now every gentle touch, every sweet smile, every moment of kindness felt like a predator grooming its prey. Michael noticed my increasing anxiety and tried to reassure me. He suggested that maybe the vacation would be good for us, that some distance and relaxation might help me gain perspective. He didn't say it outright, but I could tell he was beginning to believe the family narrative that I was having some kind of breakdown. When I tried to explain my fears about leaving Emma with Rachel, He reminded me of all the times Rachel had babysat without incident, of her stellar reputation at the daycare, of the fact that she had passed multiple background checks and held certifications in child CPR and first aid. Every rational argument was on his side, and I had nothing but intuition and circumstantial evidence. Finally, I agreed to the weekend trip, but only with conditions. I insisted on installing baby monitors throughout Rachel's house, claiming I would feel more comfortable being able to check in on Emma whenever I wanted. Rachel agreed readily, even enthusiastically, saying she understood completely and that she would want the same thing in my position. She helped me set up the cameras herself, showing me the best angles to capture the playroom, Emma's bedroom, and the main living areas. Her cooperation made me doubt myself even more. Would a murderer be so willing to be monitored? Or was she simply that confident in her ability to avoid detection? The night before we were supposed to leave, Rachel texted me constantly about all the fun activities she had planned for Emma. She had bought tickets to the Children's Museum, planned a baking project to make Emma's favorite chocolate chip cookies, and even arranged a playdate with one of Emma's friends from school whose mother she knew from the daycare. Everything sounded perfect, normal, exactly what a loving aunt would plan for a special weekend with her niece. I packed Emma's bag with shaking hands, including her favorite stuffed elephant, her special blanket that she couldn't sleep without, and enough clothes for a week even though we would only be gone 2 days. That night, Emma crawled into bed with us, something she rarely did anymore, claiming she had a bad dream. She couldn't remember what the dream was about, only that it made her feel scared. I held her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling her small heart beating against my chest. Michael wrapped his arms around both of us, and we lay there in the darkness, a family cocooned against the world. I wanted to freeze that moment, to never let morning come, to keep my daughter safe in my arms forever. But time, as always, moved forward relentlessly. Morning arrived gray and drizzly, unusual for Denver in October. Emma was excited about her weekend with Aunt Rachel, bouncing around as we got her dressed and ready. She had helped Rachel plan the cookie recipe, insisting on adding extra chocolate chips, and couldn't wait to get started. As we drove to Rachel's house, Emma chattered from her car seat about all the things she wanted to do, while I gripped the steering wheel and tried to keep my breathing steady. Michael reached over and squeezed my hand, perhaps sensing my tension, but the gesture felt hollow. He didn't truly understand the danger I felt in every cell of my body. Rachel met us at the door with her perfect smile, immediately sweeping Emma up into a hug. The house smelled like cinnamon and apples, and she had already set up an arts and crafts station in the living room with all of Emma's favorite supplies. Everything looked so normal, so safe, so carefully orchestrated to appear perfect. As I handed Emma's overnight bag to Rachel, our fingers touched briefly, and her skin felt cold despite the warm house. She must have noticed my shiver because her smile widened slightly, a minute expression that could have meant anything or nothing. We went through Emma's routine one more time, even though Rachel knew it by heart. Bedtime at 8, no screen time after dinner, her allergy medication if she seemed sniffly, and absolutely no nuts of any kind because of her mild cashew sensitivity. Rachel nodded along, assuring us she had already cleared the house of anything that might trigger Emma's allergies. She showed us the EpiPen she kept in the kitchen drawer, just in case, though Emma's allergy wasn't severe enough to typically require it. Every precaution seemed to be in place, every detail attended to with meticulous care. As we prepared to leave, I knelt down to Emma's level, pulling her into a tight hug that probably lasted too long. I whispered in her ear to be good for Aunt Rachel, and reminded her of our special rule that she should only eat food that Mommy or Daddy gave her permission for. It was an old rule from when she was younger and prone to accepting treats from strangers, but she nodded solemnly, sensing perhaps that this reminder carried more weight than usual. Michael kissed her goodbye, and we walked to the car, Emma waving enthusiastically from the window as Rachel held her up to watch us leave. The drive to the airport was silent except for the sound of rain hitting the windshield. I stared at the baby monitor app on my phone, watching Emma and Rachel settle into the craft project, everything appearing completely normal. Michael finally spoke as we pulled into the airport parking garage, telling me to try to relax, that Emma was in good hands, that we both needed this break. His words felt like they were coming from very far away. I nodded mechanically, going through the motions of checking our bags, passing through security, finding our gate. All the while, my phone remained clutched in my hand, the baby monitor app open. Our flight was delayed due to weather, giving me an extra 2 hours to sit in the airport and watch Rachel interact with Emma through the cameras. They made lunch together, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with the crusts cut off just how Emma liked them, though I noticed Rachel was careful to use sunflower seed butter instead of peanut butter. They played board games, read stories, and built a blanket fort in the living room. Everything looked so wonderfully normal that I began to feel foolish. Maybe I really was paranoid. Maybe grief and stress had twisted my perception until I saw monsters where there were none. Just as they called our boarding group, I realized with a jolt of panic that I had forgotten to pack Emma's special blanket. She couldn't sleep without it, had never spent a night away from home without that threadbare piece of fabric that had been with her since birth. Michael was already in line, showing his boarding pass, but I grabbed his arm and told him I had to go back. He looked at me with a mixture of frustration and pity, reminding me that Emma would be fine for one night without it, that Rachel could handle any minor upset. But I was already backing away, telling him to get on the plane, that I would catch the next flight after delivering the blanket. The look on his face as I hurried away nearly broke my heart. I could see him weighing whether to follow me, whether this was another manifestation of what he saw as my deteriorating mental state. In the end, he boarded the plane, probably thinking it would be better to give me space to work through whatever I needed to work through. I raced back to our car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. The rain had intensified, turning the roads slick and dangerous, but I drove as fast as I dared, that forgotten blanket my lifeline back to my daughter. I used my spare key to let myself into Rachel's house, not wanting to disturb them if Emma was napping. The house was quiet except for the sound of the television playing cartoons softly in the living room. I grabbed the blanket from where I had left it on the hallway table and was about to announce my presence when I heard Rachel's voice from the kitchen, speaking on the phone. Something in her tone made me freeze, pressing myself against the wall just out of sight. She sounded different, harder somehow, the sweet aunt persona completely absent from her voice. The words I heard next changed everything. Rachel was discussing Emma, but not in the way an aunt talks about her niece. She spoke clinically, calculating, mentioning inheritance and trust funds, and how after this one, her children would receive everything from their grandmother's estate. She mentioned that 4 accidents would be harder to explain than 3, but that once Emma was gone, there would be no other heirs to complicate things. My legs nearly gave out as I pressed myself harder against the wall, my phone already in my hand, hitting record even as my mind struggled to process what I was hearing. She continued talking, her voice casual as if discussing dinner plans rather than the murder of my child. She mentioned brownies cooling in the kitchen, already prepared with enough crushed cashews to trigger Emma's allergy. She referenced a bottle of Benadryl on the counter, not as treatment but as an alibi, something she could point to and claim she tried to save Emma when the reaction occurred. She even laughed, the sound making my skin crawl, as she compared it to what happened with Marcus, how she had been right there but just couldn't save him in time. Every word was another nail in the coffin of evidence I desperately needed. I heard her end the call and begin humming, the same haunting melody I realized she had hummed at each funeral, a lullaby that would forever be associated with death in my mind. I backed slowly toward the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type the message to Michael telling him to call 911, that Emma was in immediate danger. But as I reached for the door handle, I heard Emma's laughter from upstairs, my baby playing happily, unaware that her aunt was preparing to murder her. The sound paralyzed me. How could I leave her here even for the moments it would take to get help? I crept toward the stairs, staying close to the walls, trying to remember which floorboards creaked from our many visits here. The playroom was on the 2nd floor, but to reach it, I would have to pass through the living room where Rachel had been. I had just placed my foot on the first step when her voice rang out from below, sickeningly sweet and concerned. She had spotted me, asking if I had forgotten something, her head tilted slightly as if confused by my presence. Her smile was warm, motherly even, but her eyes remained cold and calculating, already assessing this unexpected complication to her plan. My phone buzzed frantically in my pocket, Michael calling back repeatedly, but I couldn't answer. Couldn't break eye contact with the woman who planned to murder my child. I managed to stammer something about Emma's inhaler, the lie coming automatically even as my voice shook. Rachel's smile tightened imperceptibly as she assured me she had one here, gesturing toward the kitchen where I knew those poison brownies waited. She insisted I come look, her body language shifting subtly to block my path to the stairs, to Emma, to safety. The sound of little feet overhead made my heart constrict. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, paint smeared on her cheeks from the craft project, beaming when she saw me. She called out excitedly, telling me about the pictures she had been making, and I had to force myself to smile, to keep my voice steady as I told her to come to me. But Rachel intervened, mentioning the special brownies they had made together, how they were Emma's favorite and still warm from the oven. The way Emma's eyes lit up at the mention of treats made me want to scream. I started down the stairs, trying to appear calm while my mind raced for a solution. Emma bounded down behind me, and I caught her hand the moment she was within reach, probably gripping harder than necessary. I made up a story about a forgotten doctor's appointment, already pulling Emma toward the door, but Rachel moved to block our exit. Her mask of concern never slipped as she suggested I looked stressed, that I should sit down, have some tea, let Emma enjoy the brownies they had worked so hard on. Every word was perfectly calculated to sound reasonable to anyone listening, painting me as the unstable one. My phone was going crazy with texts from Michael, asking what was happening, saying he was stuck at security and couldn't leave the airport. Another message popped up on Rachel's phone, which she glanced at quickly before her face paled for just a moment. I caught a glimpse of it, something from James about Europe receipts and needing to talk urgently. The perfect facade was beginning to crack, but Rachel recovered quickly, insisting more firmly that we couldn't leave, that she had made the brownies especially for Emma, her favorite chocolate with nuts, reaching out to touch my daughter's head. That gesture, predatory and possessive, finally snapped something in me. I pulled Emma behind me and told Rachel no, my voice stronger than it had been. For the first time, her mask truly slipped. Her eyes narrowed and the real Rachel emerged, cold and calculating. She mentioned finding the baby monitors, all of them, her voice dripping with hurt that I could spy on her after all she had done for our family. She knew I had been watching, had probably known all along, and had proceeded with her plan anyway, confident in her ability to explain away any suspicions. Her phone rang again and she answered without breaking eye contact with me. I could hear James's panicked voice mentioning an insurance investigator at their house. Rachel's face went white as she gripped my arm, her nails digging in painfully, telling James she would call him back due to a family emergency. When she hung up, tears suddenly filled her eyes, the performance beginning again. She claimed to be Emma's legal guardian, that documents had been signed for our trip, making her responsible if anything happened to us. The tears looked so real, so convincing, that for a moment I almost doubted what I had heard with my own ears. The sound of car doors slamming outside broke the spell. James entered with a man in a suit who was clearly the insurance investigator. Rachel's grip on my arm tightened painfully as the investigator's eyes found mine, stating he needed to speak with me about insurance policies. When I expressed confusion, he pulled out a folder showing policies purchased in my name for Emma, Lucas, Sophie, and Marcus. My signature was on every document, perfectly forged by someone who had studied my handwriting carefully. Rachel had worked in insurance processing before the daycare, giving her the knowledge and connections to create this elaborate fraud. My phone buzzed with another message from Michael. Rachel had texted him claiming I was having an episode, painting herself as the concerned relative trying to manage my mental breakdown. Within seconds, the family group chat exploded with messages of concern and prayers, everyone buying into Rachel's narrative that I was unstable and dangerous to my own child. She had orchestrated every detail, turning my family against me with surgical precision. Even James looked at me with pity rather than suspicion, completely under his wife's spell. But then something unexpected happened. James mentioned some paperwork Rachel had him sign for their Europe trip, documents he thought were just standard travel insurance forms. When he checked his phone for the details, he discovered they were actually guardianship papers for Emma, filed the day before Marcus had died. The silence in the room was deafening as everyone processed this information. Even the investigator looked uncomfortable. I seized the moment to demand they check Rachel's laptop, which was sitting right there on the kitchen counter, still open from her earlier activities. Rachel moved toward it, but James reached it first. His face drained of color as he read the search history displayed on the screen. The searches were damning and recent, made at 4 that morning while the rest of the world slept. Phrases like accidental ingestion in children, anaphylaxis response time, custody after parent death, and inheritance law for minor beneficiaries. He looked up at his wife with horror dawning in his eyes. The man who had loved and trusted her finally seeing glimpses of the monster she truly was. Rachel's carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble, but she wasn't finished yet. The doorbell rang with jarring suddenness, and when Rachel opened it, 2 police officers stood there. She burst into tears immediately, Oscar-worthy performance beginning as she thanked them for coming, claiming I was trying to kidnap my own daughter while having a mental health crisis. One of the officers recognized her immediately from a grief counseling group they apparently both attended, his sympathy evident as he offered his condolences for all she had been through. She painted a picture of a sister-in-law driven mad by grief, making wild accusations, threatening the family, needing immediate psychiatric intervention. The officers turned to me with professional sympathy, the kind reserved for people who need help but might be dangerous. They spoke in calm, measured tones about coming with them voluntarily, about getting the help I needed. I frantically told them to check the brownies in the kitchen, that they were poisoned with cashews, but Rachel gasped in horror at my accusation. She produced a folder she had prepared, filled with edited emails and text messages taken out of context, documentation of my supposed mental decline over months. The timestamps had been altered, but would the officers notice such details in the moment? Emma's small voice cut through the chaos, asking why everyone was upset. Her innocent confusion broke my heart as she stood there, not understanding why the adults around her were acting so strangely. My friend Sarah arrived then, bursting through the door claiming Rachel had called her because she was worried about me. My heart sank as I realized Sarah had been compromised too, either bought or manipulated into supporting Rachel's version of events. She told the officers about our wine bar conversation, spinning it as obsessive ramblings about the children's deaths, painting me as unhinged rather than investigative. Michael finally managed to call the police directly, but the same officers answered. Rachel took his call, speaking to him with gentle concern, assuring him she would take care of Emma until I got the help I needed. The world was spinning, everyone believing her narrative when Emma said something that made everyone freeze. She asked if I was confused like Cousin Lucas had been. When I asked what she meant, she innocently explained that Aunt Rachel had told her Lucas got confused and forgot how to use stairs safely. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as everyone processed this strange explanation given to a 5-year-old about a death. The insurance investigator stepped forward, suggesting everyone calm down and that there were serious questions that needed answering. But Rachel interrupted smoothly, insisting those questions could wait until after I received the help I so clearly needed. The officers moved toward me, asking me to come voluntarily for a psychiatric evaluation. I knew how this looked, knew that resistance would only confirm their assumptions about my mental state. If I went with them, I would be leaving Emma with a murderer. If I refused, they would take me anyway, probably more forcefully, traumatizing Emma even more. I asked to say goodbye to my daughter, and they allowed it. I knelt down and pulled her into the tightest hug, whispering urgently in her ear to remember our special rule about not eating anything without Mommy's permission. She nodded solemnly against my shoulder, perhaps sensing the gravity of the moment even if she didn't understand it. I took a photo of her with my phone, making sure to capture Rachel in the background, creating a timestamp and evidence that they were together. Then I let them lead me away. My daughter's confused face, the last thing I saw before the police car door closed. In the back of the patrol car, I pulled up the recording on my phone with shaking fingers, desperate to play Rachel's confession for the officers. But the audio was garbled, corrupted, completely useless. Whether by design or terrible luck, my one piece of concrete evidence was gone. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, a photo of Emma playing happily with her craft supplies. The message read that she was safe with family who loved her, that I should focus on getting the help I needed. The casual cruelty of it, the confidence that she had won, made me want to scream. At the police station, Sarah was already waiting in the lobby. When I confronted her about being bought, her face crumbled. She admitted Rachel had paid off her student loans, all $60,000, but swore she thought she was helping me. Rachel had convinced her that I was truly sick, that acknowledging my delusions would only make things worse, that this intervention was necessary for my own good. The betrayal cut deep, but I could see Sarah beginning to question the narrative as she spoke. Why would someone pay $60,000 to help a delusional relative get treatment? The doubt in her eyes gave me a tiny spark of hope. The psychiatric evaluator, Dr. Patricia Brennan, arrived with a thick file that Rachel had apparently been compiling for years. Every concern I had raised about the deaths had been documented and twisted into evidence of escalating paranoia. Every question became an accusation, every doubt a delusion. The file showed a progression from mild anxiety after Lucas's death to full-blown psychosis after Marcus drowned, complete with fabricated therapy sessions I had never attended and prescriptions for antipsychotic medications I had never taken. The level of planning was staggering, years of groundwork laid for this exact moment. Michael arrived as Dr. Brennan was reviewing Rachel's documentation. He looked haggard, torn between loyalty to his wife and the compelling evidence Rachel had manufactured. He spoke gently about previous episodes I had supposedly had, showing me text messages from my phone number that I had never sent, discussing dark thoughts and fears about the children in our family. Each message was perfectly crafted to support the narrative of my declining mental health. When I insisted I had never sent them, the pity in his eyes was almost unbearable. Even my own husband had been turned against me. Dr. Brennan recommended a 72-hour psychiatric hold for evaluation, presenting it as voluntary, but making clear that refusal would result in an involuntary commitment. I thought of Emma, alone with Rachel for 3 days, and knew I had to be smart. Fighting would only dig me deeper into the hole Rachel had prepared. I agreed to the hold, but insisted on seeing all the documentation. As I reviewed the papers, the full scope of Rachel's plan became clear. She had been building this case since before Lucas died, creating a framework that would explain away any suspicions I might raise. The psychiatric ward was a nightmare of white walls and locked doors. They took my phone, my belongings, everything that connected me to the outside world. I was truly helpless, trapped in a system designed to help people but being weaponized against me. That first night, I lay awake on the narrow bed, imagining all the ways Rachel might hurt my daughter. Would she use the poison brownies, or had she prepared something else? Would it be quick, or would my baby suffer? The thoughts tortured me until medication I pretended to swallow finally pulled me under. The next morning brought group therapy, where I had to sit in a circle with genuinely ill people and pretend to share their struggles. An older woman named Helen sat beside me during art therapy, quietly warning me that the fastest way out was to admit I was sick. She had been there 6 months, placed by a son who wanted her house. Her story, a cautionary tale about how family could use the system against you. Her advice was practical but soul-crushing to acknowledge that fighting would only extend my imprisonment while Rachel had free access to my daughter. Michael visited that afternoon, assuring me Emma was okay, but admitting he hadn't actually seen her. Rachel had sent photos and claimed Emma was napping when he tried to visit. I begged him to physically verify our daughter's safety, to check the brownies, to question the convenient timing of everything. For a moment, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. He mentioned finding large deposits in James and Rachel's bank accounts, payments that aligned with each child's death. But when Dr. Brennan called him later, he had apparently shared these concerns, which were now being added to my file as evidence of increasingly elaborate delusions. By the second day, my visiting privileges were suspended due to agitation. I was completely cut off from the outside world, unable to know if Emma was safe, if anyone was questioning Rachel's story, if help might be coming. That night, Helen slipped me a contraband cell phone, whispering that I had 10 minutes before the night guard made rounds. I called Michael's number with trembling fingers, but Rachel answered. She informed me with sick satisfaction that Michael had been in a car accident, brake failure causing him to crash on the highway. He was in intensive care, and she was handling everything, including taking care of Emma. The implications were clear. Rachel had tried to kill my husband to remove another obstacle to her plan. With both parents out of the picture, emergency custody of Emma would naturally fall to her loving aunt and uncle, especially with all the documentation showing my mental instability. I could hear the smile in Rachel's voice as she discussed how head injuries could be unpredictable, how Michael might not wake up the same if he woke up at all. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, the full horror of our situation crashing over me. Rachel had won, and Emma would pay the price. The next day, James visited. his face grave as he delivered news about Michael's condition. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but he remained unconscious. James spoke about Rachel's devotion, how she hadn't left Michael's bedside, how she was managing everything with such grace. When I tried to tell him about the bank deposits, about the insurance policies, about the searches on her computer, he cut me off. Rachel had already explained everything away, each piece of evidence having an innocent explanation. The investigators' concerns had been addressed, the deposits explained as inheritances, the searches as research for concerned daycare parents. He mentioned filing a restraining order to protect Rachel and Emma from my dangerous delusions. The system designed to protect victims was being used to isolate me from my daughter completely. After he left, Dr. Brennan informed me that emergency custody had been officially granted to James and Rachel, given Michael's condition and my hospitalization. The legal machinery clicked into place with terrifying efficiency, each component working exactly as Rachel had planned. My daughter was now officially in the custody of her would-be killer, and I was powerless to stop it. That night, I made a desperate decision. If playing by their rules meant Emma would die, then I had to break them. Using techniques Helen had shared about shift changes and security gaps, I attempted a faked overdose with hoarded pills. The medical wing had lighter security, and during the chaos of my transfer and treatment, Helen created a distraction that pulled guards away. I slipped out during a shift change, wearing scrubs stolen from a laundry cart, my heart pounding as I walked through doors that should have been locked but were propped open by overworked staff. I had no money, no phone, no car, but I had a mother's desperation. I hitchhiked to the hospital where Michael lay unconscious, needing to see him, needing to know he was alive. I found Rachel in his room playing the devoted sister-in-law, holding his hand and whispering words I couldn't hear. The steady beep of machines was the only indication he still lived. She spoke without looking up, unsurprised by my arrival, telling me security was already on the way. The casualness of her evil, the way she sat there pretending to care while having tried to murder him, made my stomach turn. I asked her point blank what she had used, how much brake fluid it took to cause a catastrophic failure. Her smile was chilling as she talked about how brake fluid degraded over time, how accidents happened, how no one could prove anything. When I asked why she was doing this, her mask finally dropped completely. She spoke about her children deserving everything, every penny of the grandmother's trust that had been set aside for all the grandchildren. With Lucas, Sophie, Marcus, and soon Emma gone, her children would be the sole beneficiaries of a fortune worth millions. 3 children had already died for money, and my daughter was next. She mentioned taking Emma to a cabin the next day, a property I didn't even know she owned. Fresh air might help Emma feel better, she said with mock concern. Or it might not. The threat was clear. Security arrived before I could respond, and Rachel played her part perfectly, the frightened relative dealing with a dangerous mental patient. As they dragged me away, I heard her whisper to Michael's unconscious form that she would take care of everything. The words were a promise and a threat, delivered to a man who couldn't hear them, performed solely for her own satisfaction. Back in the psychiatric ward, now in maximum security, I was deemed a danger to myself and others. Restraints, constant observation, heavy sedation that made thinking difficult. Dr. Brennan visited one last time, informing me that Rachel wasn't pressing charges for my escape, showing once again how understanding and forgiving she was. She mentioned that Emma was safe at home, contradicting Rachel's cabin plans. But who would believe the paranoid delusions of a restrained mental patient over the word of a respected caregiver? I was trapped more thoroughly than before, counting down hours until Rachel made her final move. That night, despite the restraints and medication, sleep eluded me. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting them obsessively, using the numbers to mark time until morning. Somewhere out there, Rachel was preparing to take my daughter away forever, and I was helpless to stop it. The morning nurse arrived with medication, and as she adjusted my restraints, she slipped something under my pillow, whispering that my friend had left it. After she gone, I found another phone, Helen's final gift before her own release or transfer. With fumbling fingers made clumsy by medication and restraints, I managed to dial the only number I had memorized, the insurance investigator. He answered on the second ring, remembering me immediately. I whispered urgently about Rachel's plans, the cabin, the pattern of deaths. He listened without interrupting, then revealed he had been investigating thoroughly. The daycare closure, the pattern of accidents following Rachel through multiple jobs, suspicious insurance payouts dating back over a decade. He needed proof, something concrete to act on. I told him about the cabin, purchased with cash the previous year, located off Route 47 near Pine Ridge. He promised to look into it immediately, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. A tip from a psychiatric patient wasn't much to go on. The phone battery died before I could make another call, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Then, suddenly, alarms sounded throughout the ward. Through my door's window, I could see staff running, responding to some crisis elsewhere in the building. The door to my room opened, and Helen stood there in a nurse's uniform, her 6-month imprisonment having taught her every security flaw in the building. She had heard everything, she said, orchestrating her own escape when she learned a child was in danger. The investigator had called in serious tips, police were mobilizing, but they didn't know about the cabin's location. Helen freed my restraints with practiced efficiency, and we moved through the chaos she had created in another wing. The medication made my movements sluggish, but adrenaline pushed me forward. We reached an emergency exit, where the investigator waited in his car, engine running. He had believed me enough to come, to risk his license and career on the word of a woman everyone thought was insane. As we sped toward the cabin, he filled me in on what he had discovered. Rachel's pattern went back 15 years, through foster homes and elderly care facilities. 6 confirmed deaths, possibly more. Always accidents, always insured. The drive to Pine Ridge took forever and no time at all. My heart hammered as we turned onto the dirt road leading to the cabin, gravel spraying under our tires. Rachel's car was parked outside, the cabin door standing ominously open. I was out of the car before it fully stopped, running on legs that barely held me. The house was too quiet, no sounds of a child playing or talking. I burst inside, calling Emma's name, my voice cracking with desperation. The living room was empty, the kitchen abandoned except for a half-full glass of juice on the counter and an empty medicine bottle beside it. I found them in the back bedroom. Emma lay on the bed, still and pale, while Rachel sat beside her, stroking her hair and humming that cursed lullaby. She looked up at me with calm satisfaction, telling me I was too late, that Emma had been so tired she needed a nap. But as I lunged for my daughter, I could see the faint rise and fall of her chest. She was alive, barely, but alive. I called 911 while checking her vital signs, sobbing instructions to the operator about the poisoning, begging them to hurry. Rachel stood slowly, seemingly unconcerned about the investigator and police who would soon arrive. She spoke about how everything would have been simple if I had just accepted the truth. A grieving family, tragic accidents, generous insurance payouts to help the survivors move forward. She didn't see herself as a monster, but as a mother securing her children's future through whatever means necessary. The sirens grew louder as I held Emma, trying to keep her conscious, whispering promises and pleas. Rachel's confident facade finally cracked when I told her that Michael had woken up, that he had told police about the cut brake lines, that they had found evidence in her car. The police arrived with the paramedics, immediately working on Emma while arresting Rachel. As they led her away, she looked at me with pure hatred, promising this wasn't over, that she would get out and finish what she started. But I knew better. The evidence was overwhelming, the pattern too clear, the witnesses too many. She would never hurt another child again. The ride to the hospital was a blur of medical terminology and frantic activity. Emma's small hand in mine was cold but present, her pulse weak but steady. At the hospital, they pumped her stomach, administered activated charcoal, and began the careful process of bringing her back. Michael arrived in a wheelchair, still weak from his own near-death experience, but determined to be there. We sat together in the pediatric ICU, watching our daughter fight, praying to anyone who would listen. James came too, hollow-eyed with shock, unable to comprehend how the woman he loved had hidden such evil. He kept apologizing, saying he should have seen it, should have protected the children. Even my family arrived, my parents and extended relatives who had doubted me now faced with the horrible truth. Their apologies meant nothing compared to the little girl fighting for her life because they had chosen to believe a murderer over a mother's instincts. It took 18 agonizing hours before Emma opened her eyes, weak and confused but alive. Her first words were about her tummy hurting, such a normal complaint that I sobbed with relief. She mentioned that Aunt Rachel said the juice would help her sleep, innocent words that would later help convict her would-be killer. Over the following days, as Emma recovered with the resilience only children possess, the full scope of Rachel's crimes came to light through investigation and evidence. 17 insurance policies spanning 15 years, 6 confirmed deaths with 3 more suspicious cases being reopened. The journal found hidden in Rachel and James's attic was the most damning evidence. Written in Rachel's neat handwriting, it detailed each murder, justifying them as necessary sacrifices for her own children's future. The entries about Emma were the hardest to read. Clinical notes about dosages, response times, and planned explanations for the tragedy. She had been studying my daughter for months, noting her habits, her favorite foods, the exact amount of cashews needed to trigger a fatal reaction while making it appear accidental. The level of premeditation was staggering, turning my stomach as I realized how long my baby had been in danger. The trial became a media sensation. The Black Widow babysitter, they called her, though no clever nickname could capture the horror of what she had done. I kept Emma away from all of it, moving us to a new state where no one knew our story. Michael's recovery was slow but complete, the 3 of us learning to heal together from the trauma Rachel had inflicted. We found a small town in Oregon where Emma could grow up without the shadow of what almost happened to her. The insurance money that Rachel had killed for was placed in trust for the victims' families. Blood money that no one wanted, but that might help other children in memory of those lost. I still wake up sometimes, heart racing from nightmares where I'm too late, where the juice works faster, where no one believes me in time. Michael holds me through these episodes, understanding that some wounds never fully heal. Emma, now 7, knows only that Aunt Rachel was sick in her mind and had to go away. Someday we'll have to tell her the full truth. But for now, we protect her innocence as fiercely as we protect her life. She thrives in our new home, making friends, excelling in school, living the life that 3 other children were denied. The families of Lucas, Sophie, and Marcus stay in touch. We share a bond forged in unimaginable loss and the horrific revelation of how our children really died. Patricia, Sophie's mother, told me she always wondered about the peanut exposure but had been too deep in grief to question it. Marcus's parents admitted they had found the pool cover manipulation suspicious, but hadn't wanted to accuse during such a tragic time. We all carry the weight of our silence, the what-ifs that torment parents who couldn't protect their babies from a monster wearing a familiar face. Rachel was sentenced to life without parole, though even that seems insufficient for stealing 3 young lives and attempting to take a 4th. During the sentencing, she showed no remorse, maintaining that she had done what any good mother would do to secure her children's futures. The judge's disgust was evident as he pronounced sentence after sentence, ensuring she would die in prison. James divorced her immediately and disappeared with their children, unable to face the community that knew him as the husband of a serial killer. I hope he finds peace somewhere, though I doubt such a thing is possible after loving someone capable of such evil. The daycare industry implemented new safeguards because of our case, including better tracking of employees who move between facilities and mandatory reporting of unusual patterns of incidents. It's a small comfort, knowing that some good might come from such tragedy, that other children might be protected because of what we endured. But mostly I focus on the present, on Emma's laughter, on the simple joy of watching her grow up. Every birthday, every milestone, every ordinary day is a gift that 3 other children never received. We honor them by living fully, by treasuring what Rachel tried to steal, by never taking a single moment for granted. Sometimes I think about the randomness of it all, how Emma survived only because I forgot a blanket. Such a small thing, a moment of forgetfulness that saved my daughter's life. If I had remembered to pack it, if I had gotten on that plane with Michael, if I had arrived even 5 minutes later at the cabin, the outcome would have been devastatingly different. The margin between life and death was measured in forgotten fabric and mother's intuition, a reminder of how fragile our children's safety really is. We can do everything right, follow all the rules, trust the right people, and still find ourselves face to face with unimaginable evil. I've become an advocate for trusting parental instincts, speaking at conferences about the danger of dismissing concerns as paranoia or grief. Too often, we silence our inner alarms because we don't want to seem difficult or paranoid. We accept explanations that don't quite fit because the alternative is too horrible to contemplate. But sometimes the unthinkable is exactly what's happening, and the only thing standing between a child and danger is a parent who refuses to be silenced. I tell our story not to frighten but to empower, to remind parents that their instincts exist for a reason and deserve to be heard. The term sister-in-law no longer exists in my vocabulary. Rachel stole that relationship along with so much else, perverting family bonds into weapons of destruction. But she didn't win, not completely. Emma lives, Michael survived, and Rachel rots in prison where she belongs. We build our new life on the ashes of the old, different but not destroyed. Love persists despite evil's best efforts, and every day my daughter smiles is a victory over the woman who tried to take everything. That's the ending Rachel never planned for the one where good triumphs, where a mother's love proves stronger than a killer's greed, where the intended victim grows up to live a beautiful life. Looking back, the signs were there from the beginning. The 2 quick funerals, the immediate wealth, the insistence on being alone with the children. But we explain away red flags when they're waved by people we trust, finding reasonable explanations for unreasonable events. We want to believe in the goodness of family, in the sacred bond between caregivers and children. That faith in human decency is what predators like Rachel count on, using our better nature against us. The lesson isn't to become paranoid or distrustful, but to listen when our instincts scream warnings, to ask uncomfortable questions even when everyone tells us we're overreacting. I think about those 3 children often. Lucas with his dinosaur obsession and gentle nature. Sophie with her delicate beauty and artistic soul. Marcus with his superhero dreams and infectious laugh. They deserve to grow up, to become teenagers who rolled their eyes at their parents, to fall in love, to have children of their own. Rachel stole all their tomorrows for money that now sits in trust funds, blood-stained dollars that can never buy back what was lost. Their families continue on, forever broken but still breathing, carrying memories of babies who should still be here. We honor them by remembering, by saying their names, by ensuring their deaths meant something in the end. The extended family never fully recovered from the revelation. Trust, once shattered, doesn't easily rebuild. Holiday gatherings are smaller now, conversations more guarded, everyone wondering how they missed something so monstrous. My parents struggle with guilt over not believing me, my mother especially tormented by how she shut down my concerns. But I don't hold grudges against those Rachel fooled. She was a master manipulator who spent years perfecting her act. The real villain is sitting in a federal prison, not at our Thanksgiving table. Forgiveness comes easier when you've stared down true evil and survived. Emma knows she's special, though she doesn't fully understand why. She sees the way I watch her at playgrounds, the extra hugs before bed, the fierce protectiveness that borders on paranoia. Someday I'll have to explain why Mommy gets scared when she's out of sight too long, why we don't talk about certain family members, why some of her cousins exist only in photographs. But today she's just a little girl making flower crowns in our backyard, safe and oblivious to how close she came to joining them. That innocence is precious, worth protecting as long as possible. The truth will find her eventually, but for now, she gets to just be a child. The cashew allergy that saved her life through my vigilance has faded with age, though we still carry EpiPens out of habit and trauma. It's ironic that the very condition Rachel tried to exploit became the reason for the precautions that ultimately exposed her plan. Every safety measure we put in place, from the baby monitors to the forgotten blanket necessitating my return, formed a web that caught a killer. Sometimes the universe provides protection in unexpected ways, guardian angels disguised as minor allergies and maternal forgetfulness. We were lucky in ways that 3 other families were not, saved by circumstances that feel too coincidental to be mere chance. Michael and I went to therapy, individually and together, learning to process trauma that few can understand. He struggles with guilt over not believing me sooner, tormented by what-ifs that have no answers. The brake line incident left him with physical scars to match our emotional ones. a permanent reminder of how far Rachel was willing to go. But we survived, our marriage stronger for having weathered the unthinkable together. We learned to trust each other's instincts, to listen when one of us feels something is wrong, to never again dismiss concerns as paranoia. Our love story now includes a chapter written in terror and triumph, binding us through shared survival. I returned once to Denver, needing to see the places where everything happened. Rachel's Victorian house stands empty, too tainted by association for anyone to buy despite its beauty. The pool where Marcus drowned has been filled in, becoming a garden that new owners might someday enjoy without knowing its history. I drove past each location like visiting graves, saying goodbye to the life we had before Rachel showed her true face. Then I returned to Oregon, to our new life, to Emma asking what we were having for dinner. The past informs but doesn't define us. We are more than what we survived. Prison communications are monitored, but Rachel still manages to send letters occasionally, maintaining her innocence, claiming conspiracy, promising lawsuits that never materialize. I burn them unread now, denying her even that small power over our lives. She exists in a concrete box, her world shrunk to the size of her cell, while Emma's world expands daily with new experiences and possibilities. That's justice. Imperfect but final. The woman who killed for money now owns nothing, controls nothing, influences nothing. Her own children will grow up without her, raised by relatives who struggle to explain why mommy lives in a place they can't visit. Sometimes strangers recognize us from the trial coverage, their eyes filling with that uncomfortable mix of sympathy and curiosity. We've gotten good at polite deflection, protecting our privacy while acknowledging their concern. The media attention faded as newer tragedies captured public interest, but our story lives on in true crime podcasts and documentary features we don't watch. That chapter is closed for us, even as others dissect it for entertainment. We focus on writing new chapters, ordinary ones filled with homework struggles and soccer practice. The beautiful mundanity of a life that continues against all odds. The investigator who believed me when no one else would become a family friend. Uncle Max to Emma, who doesn't know he helped save her life. He used our case to transform how insurance fraud investigations handle patterns of suspicious deaths, potentially saving other children from similar fates. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear rumpled suits and believe desperate mothers when logic suggests they shouldn't. He risked everything on instinct and incomplete evidence, choosing to act rather than wait for proof that might have come too late. Every Christmas, he receives a card with Emma's school photo, a reminder that his choice mattered. Helen, my fellow psychiatric ward prisoner who provided the phones that saved Emma, disappeared after the trial. I hope she found freedom and peace, finally escaped from the son who imprisoned her for profit. She risked extending her own captivity to help a stranger save a child. Humanity triumphing over self-preservation. Guardian angels appear in unexpected forms, sometimes wearing hospital gowns and bearing contraband cell phones. Her actions remind me that even in the darkest places, kindness persists. People choose to help despite personal cost. Wherever she is, she has my eternal gratitude. The cabin where it all ended was demolished by court order, the land returning to forest as if it never existed. Nature reclaims spaces where evil occurred, covering trauma with new growth. Sometimes healing looks like empty lots where buildings once stood, absence more peaceful than presence. The families affected scattered across the country, each finding their own way to continue living. We share Christmas cards and occasional phone calls, bound forever by loss, but not defined by it. Our children would have been friends, growing up together at family gatherings. Instead, their parents tend graves and memories, honoring short lives that deserved so much more. This story ends not with Rachel's conviction or Emma's recovery, but with an ordinary Tuesday 5 years later. Emma comes home from school chattering about a science project. Michael cooks dinner while badly singing along to the radio, and I help with homework at our kitchen table. No one watching would guess our history. The nightmare we survived, the evil we defeated. That's the real triumph, not just surviving, but truly living again. Rachel failed in her ultimate goal. Love persisted, life continued, And a little girl grew up surrounded by fierce protection and endless love. The monster lost, the family won, and somewhere in whatever afterlife exists, 3 children know their deaths were not in vain. Every parent reading this holds their children a little tighter, trusts their instincts a little more, questions unusual patterns despite social pressure to stay quiet. That's the legacy of Lucas, Sophie, and Marcus. Their short lives ripple outward in increased vigilance, reformed policies, and parents who choose to be difficult rather than silent when something feels wrong. They matter, not just as victims, but as catalysts for change. Rachel stole their futures, but not their impact. In the end, that's the only justice we can offer them, that their deaths meant something, saved others, changed a broken system that allowed a predator to hunt for too long. I still check on Emma multiple times each night, a habit born of trauma that may never fully fade. But now it's accompanied by gratitude rather than fear. Each peaceful breath she takes is a gift. Each morning she wakes up a victory over darkness. We survived the unthinkable, faced down pure evil, and emerged scarred but whole. Our story is one of horror but also hope, proof that mother's love and human determination can triumph over the worst humanity offers. Emma lives, laughs, grows, and dreams. Rachel sits in a cell, defeated and forgotten. In the end, love won. 10 years have passed since that terrifying day at the cabin, and life has settled into rhythms that once seemed impossible to achieve. Emma is now 17, a bright, confident teenager who plays violin in the school orchestra and dreams of becoming a pediatric surgeon. She knows the full story now, told to her gradually over the years in age-appropriate pieces. The revelation that her beloved Aunt Rachel had tried to kill her was the hardest truth we've ever had to share, but she handled it with a maturity that both broke and healed my heart. She understood why I hover sometimes, why certain triggers still make me panic, why our family looks different from others. The impact of our story rippled far beyond our immediate circle. After the trial, I was contacted by dozens of families who had experienced suspicious deaths while their children were in various caregivers' custody. Some cases were reopened, leading to 2 more convictions of caregivers who had followed Rachel's pattern. The Insurance Fraud Prevention Act, nicknamed Emma's Law, passed 3 years after the trial, requiring enhanced scrutiny of policies involving minors and mandatory investigation of patterns involving multiple child deaths. It's not perfect, but it's closed loopholes that predators like Rachel exploited for years. I wrote a book about our experience, donating all proceeds to a foundation supporting families affected by caregiver violence. The writing process was therapeutic and traumatic in equal measure, reliving those dark days to help others recognize warning signs. The book tours were difficult, meeting families who saw their own tragedies reflected in our story, parents who blamed themselves for trusting the wrong people. But it also brought connection and healing, creating a network of survivors who understood the unique grief of betrayal by those meant to protect. We check in on each other, celebrating victories and supporting each other through setbacks. Michael's recovery included returning to school to become a child advocacy lawyer. His near-death experience transformed him from a passive observer to an active protector of vulnerable children. He now works with the district attorney's office, specializing in cases involving caregiver abuse and insurance fraud. His personal understanding of how predators operate within family systems makes him exceptionally effective. Rachel's attempt to silence him created one of her most determined opponents, someone who ensures other killers face justice. He jokes darkly that she gave him his life's purpose, though we both know the price was almost too high. James eventually reached out, 5 years after the trial. He had been living in Maine with his children, working as a carpenter and slowly rebuilding their lives. His letter was pages of apology, self-recrimination, and desperate attempts to understand how he had missed the monster he married. We met once in a neutral location where he broke down completely. He showed me photos of his children, now teenagers themselves, who had no memory of their mother beyond what they'd been told. They were in therapy, processing the reality that their mother killed other children supposedly to benefit them. The sins of parents haunting innocent children, another layer of Rachel's cruelty. The financial aftermath was complex and painful. The grandmother's trust that Rachel killed for was restructured, creating scholarships in Lucas, Sophie, and Marcus's names. Their families approved this use of blood money, transforming tragedy into opportunity for other children. Rachel's children receive modest support for education and health care, the courts recognizing they were victims too. The rest funds programs teaching parents and professionals to recognize signs of systematic abuse. Money that motivated murder now serves prevention, Rachel's greed ultimately funding her worst nightmare, which is the protection of potential victims. Our small Oregon town embraced us completely, protecting our privacy while ensuring we never felt isolated. Emma grew up surrounded by chosen family, people who knew our story but saw us as more than survivors. Her best friend's mother once told me she admired how we refused to let Rachel steal our ability to trust, how we still formed deep connections despite having every reason to withdraw. It wasn't easy those early years when every new relationship felt like a risk. But Emma deserved normal friendships, sleepovers, and birthday parties. We couldn't let Rachel's evil define the boundaries of her childhood. The nightmares have faded but never fully disappeared. Sometimes I wake to phantom sounds of that haunting lullaby, or dream I'm back in the psychiatric ward, screaming truths no one believes. Michael has his own triggers, particularly around car maintenance, insisting on obsessive safety checks that we both know stem from trauma rather than genuine mechanical concern. Emma occasionally has anxiety attacks in medical settings, her body remembering a danger her conscious mind has processed and released. We're a family marked by near tragedy, carrying scars that ache during storms, but we're also proof that survival is possible. I maintained contact with the investigator, Max Sebastian, who became instrumental in reforming how suspicious death patterns are investigated. He retired last year, honored for his role in preventing dozens of potential murders through improved screening systems. At his retirement party, he introduced me to a young investigator who called our case her inspiration for entering the field. The ripple effects of one man choosing to believe a desperate mother continue spreading, saving children neither of us will ever meet. Heroes rarely know the full impact of their courage, but I made sure Max understood how many lives he saved by listening when others dismissed. The psychiatric system that failed me underwent significant reforms after our case made national news. The ease with which Rachel manipulated mental health professionals into imprisoning me exposed dangerous vulnerabilities in involuntary commitment procedures. New protocols require multiple independent evaluations and investigation of accusers' potential motives before accepting voluntary holds based solely on family testimony. Dr. Patricia Brennan, who facilitated my imprisonment, lost her license after investigation revealed she had accepted payments from Rachel disguised as donations to her research. Even the systems meant to help had been corrupted by Rachel's money and manipulation. Prison letters from Rachel eventually stopped, but not before revealing the depth of her delusion. She genuinely believed she had done nothing wrong, that ensuring her children's financial future justified murder. Her final letter, sent through her lawyer, demanded I send photos of Emma so she could see how the child she'd tried to murder was growing. The audacity of it still takes my breath away. I sent back a single photo of the memorial garden planted for Lucas, Sophie, and Marcus, with no accompanying message. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words, denying narcissists the attention they crave more than freedom itself. The daycare industry underwent massive reforms following our case. Rachel's ability to move between facilities, leaving suspicious deaths in her wake, exposed fatal gaps in background checking and incident reporting. Now, any child death or serious injury follows caregivers permanently in national databases, preventing them from simply relocating to fresh hunting grounds. Mandatory reporting requirements mean patterns emerge quickly, triggering investigations before multiple children die. It's called the Rachel Protocol in industry trainings, using her methods to teach prevention. She became the monster in cautionary tales that save lives. Sarah, my friend who Rachel bought for $60,000, spent years trying to make amends. She testified at the trial, revealing every manipulation Rachel used to turn her against me. She donated the $60,000 to the Victims Fund and volunteered countless hours with organizations supporting families dealing with caregiver abuse. I forgave her long ago, understanding how master manipulators like Rachel operate, how they identify and exploit vulnerabilities. Our friendship never fully recovered, trust broken taking different shapes when rebuilt, but we exchanged Christmas cards and genuine wishes for happiness. Some relationships can't return to what they were but can become something different. marked by hard-earned wisdom. Emma's relationship with her extended family remains complicated. Some relatives embraced us after the truth emerged, working hard to rebuild relationships damaged by Rachel's lies. Others maintain distance, whether from shame over not believing me or inability to process the horror that lived among us. Holiday gatherings are smaller now, intentionally curated to include only those who create safe, supportive environments. Emma understands why some family members aren't in our lives, accepting that blood relationships don't guarantee healthy connections. We've built a chosen family of survivors, supporters, and souls who see us whole rather than broken. The trauma manifests in unexpected ways even now. I can't watch movies involving child endangerment, my body physically unable to process fictional threats after surviving real ones. Michael meticulously checks references for anyone who interacts with Emma, from tutors to coaches, his protective instincts hypervigilant despite her approaching adulthood. Emma herself shows remarkable resilience, but admits to moments of existential weight, knowing she lives because of forgotten fabric and a mother's refusal to be silenced. She carries survivor's guilt for cousins she barely remembers, their deaths purchasing her life in Rachel's twisted economy. College approaches for Emma, bringing new anxieties about releasing her into a world that has already proven its capacity for hidden evil. We've prepared her as best we could, teaching her to trust her instincts, to question patterns that don't fit, to never let social pressure override safety concerns. She jokes that she's the most prepared freshman ever for dealing with dangerous people, but we all know it's not really funny. The price of her wisdom was too high, paid in other children's lives and our family's innocence. But she faces the future with eyes wide open, Rachel's greatest failure being the strong, aware young woman Emma became. I sometimes wonder about alternate timelines, versions of our story where I stayed silent, where I got on that plane, where I arrived 5 minutes later. The margin between Emma's survival and joining her cousins was terrifyingly slim, measured in forgotten blankets and determined resistance to gaslighting. In darker moments, I calculate the statistical improbability of our survival, how many dominoes had to fall precisely right for Emma to live. But dwelling on alternate endings serves no purpose. We live in the timeline where love won, where a mother's instincts proved correct, where the monster was caught before completing her collection. The book tours introduced me to researchers studying family annihilators and Black Widow killers, Emma's case providing unique insights into female perpetrators who kill for financial gain. Rachel's methodology, patient grooming of families before striking, using her position of trust as both weapon and shield, expanded understanding of how women commit systematic murder differently than men. She became a case study in criminology programs, her techniques dissected to prevent future predators. It's a strange immortality for someone who killed children to ensure her own children's legacy, becoming instead a cautionary tale taught to those who protect the vulnerable. Michael and I renewed our vows on the 5th anniversary of Emma's survival, needing to mark our continuation beyond just enduring. We married young the first time, children playing at adulthood, unprepared for testing that nearly broke us. Our second wedding was smaller, witnessed by those who stood by us through hell, acknowledging that we chose each other again after seeing the worst life could offer. Emma was our maid of honor, radiant in survival, living proof that our love could create and protect life against impossible odds. The photos from that day show faces marked by trauma but glowing with hard-won joy. Rachel's children reached out last year through intermediaries, now adults seeking answers about their origin story. We agreed to one meeting, carefully mediated by therapists, where they asked questions we answered as gently as possible. They looked nothing like Rachel, bearing their father's features and apparently his genuine heart. They apologized for their mother's actions, unnecessary but deeply moving, and shared their own struggles with her legacy. They chose careers in helping professions, one becoming a social worker, the other a paramedic, dedicating their lives to saving rather than taking. Perhaps redemption can skip generations, children choosing light despite parental darkness. The cabin property, cleared of its tragic structure, was donated to become a memorial park. Families bring children to play where one almost died, transformation through innocent laughter and life continuing. A small plaque bears 4 names, Lucas, Sophie, Marcus, and Emma, though only 3 rest beneath earth elsewhere. The fourth name represents survival against calculated evil, proof that sometimes the story ends differently. Parents read the names without knowing the full tale, perhaps pausing briefly at the unusual inclusion of a living child, then return to watching their own precious ones play. It's a quiet memorial to loud evil defeated, Rachel's killing ground becoming a space of joy. I learned that Helen, my psychiatric ward savior, passed away 3 years after the trial. Her obituary mentioned only that she was a devoted mother whose final years were complicated. No hint of the heroism she displayed. I attended her funeral, a stranger among mourners who knew different versions of her story. Her son was there, the one who had imprisoned her for inheritance, looking appropriately grief-stricken. I said nothing to him, honoring Helen's privacy even in death, but left flowers with a card reading simply, "Thank you from Emma." Some debts can never be repaid, only acknowledged, their weight carried forward as reminder of unexpected grace. The insurance industry implemented Rachel's rule, requiring special scrutiny when the same caregiver appears on multiple child life insurance policies. It seems obvious in hindsight, but predators exploit the obvious gaps we're too trusting to see. Claims involving children now trigger automatic reviews, patterns emerging in algorithms that human eyes missed. Technology serving protection, Rachel's analog evil spurring digital defenses. The insurance investigator who saved Emma consulted on the system's design, ensuring it would catch future Rachels before they could establish patterns. Every safeguard born from tragedy. Blood purchasing prevention. Our new normal includes small rituals of gratitude. Sunday dinners where Emma's laughter fills our kitchen, ordinary arguments about curfews and homework, the beautiful mundanity of a life that continues. We sponsor other families dealing with trauma, providing resources and hope that survival and healing are possible. Emma volunteers with children's safety programs, teaching age-appropriate awareness without stealing innocence. She transforms her near death into others' protection, Rachel's intended victim becoming a guardian of potential targets. The irony would be delicious if purchased with less pain. Sometimes reporters still contact us for anniversary retrospectives or true crime documentaries. We decline more than we accept, protective of the peace we've built. But occasionally we participate, when the platform serves education rather than entertainment, when our story might help another parent trust their instincts. The narrative has been told so many times it sometimes feels like fiction, something that happened to other people in another life. Then Emma walks through the door, living proof of evil defeated, and the reality crashes back. We survived. She lived. Rachel lost. I think about forgiveness sometimes, whether it's possible or even necessary. Not forgiveness for Rachel, who remains unrepentant in her cage, but for ourselves and those who failed us. The family members who chose comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. The systems that protected predator over prey. The friends who abandoned us when we needed support most. Forgiveness feels less like absolution and more like release, setting down weights that only burden the carriers. We forgive not because they deserve it, but because we deserve peace. Rachel took enough without us giving her our future too. The story could end here, with survival and healing and lives rebuilt from ashes. But that suggests an ending when really it's a continuation. Emma will graduate next year, attend college, perhaps marry and have children who never know how close they came to never existing. Michael and I will grow old together, Rachel's attempt to widow me failing spectacularly. The families of Lucas, Sophie, and Marcus will continue honoring their memories while building futures around absence. Rachel will die in prison, her name remembered only as cautionary tale. Life continues, mundane and miraculous, each day a victory over those who would steal tomorrow's. But the truest ending is simpler. Somewhere tonight, a mother feels uncertain about a caregiver and decides to trust her instincts, potentially saving a child from harm. An investigator takes seriously a pattern others dismiss as coincidence. A family member listens when someone expresses concerns instead of silencing them with accusations of paranoia. Our story ripples outward in ways we'll never fully know, Emma's survival spawning countless other survivals. Rachel killed 3 children but failed to kill the 4th, and in that failure lies the seeds of her ultimate defeat. Love won. Life continued. Evil lost. The final truth is this: monsters exist, wearing human faces and speaking in gentle voices. They count on our inability to reconcile their appearance with their actions, our desperate need to believe that evil announces itself plainly. But Rachel taught us that the most dangerous predators are those who make themselves indispensable before striking, who build trust specifically to exploit it. She was the perfect aunt until she wasn't, the devoted caregiver until children started dying. The lesson isn't paranoia, but awareness, not isolation, but informed trust. We can't lock our children away from the world, but we can listen when our instincts scream warnings, act when patterns emerge, believe survivors when they speak truth to power. Emma asked me once if I regret the life we lost, the innocence stolen by Rachel's evil. I told her truthfully that I mourn for the children who died and the families destroyed. But I don't regret the strength we found, the bonds forged in survival, the purpose born from pain. We are not the family we would have been without Rachel's evil, but we are a family that knows its own power, that faced down a monster and won. That knowledge is worth something, even purchased at such terrible cost. We honor the dead by living fully, protect future victims by sharing our truth, and defeat Rachel every day by simply continuing to exist. So this is our story, told in full for those who need to hear it. A mother who trusted her instincts when the world called her crazy. A father who almost died for being in the way. A daughter who lived because of forgotten fabric and fierce love. 3 children who died for money they never saw. And a monster who wore the face of family until masks became impossible to maintain. It's a story of horror, but also hope. Tragedy, but also triumph. Evil, but also the good that rises to meet it. Rachel is imprisoned. Emma is free. In the end, that's all that matters. In the end, love won,